Caregiver Janet never questioned why Mrs. Patterson ate canned soup every day and drove a 20-year-old car. After caring for her for 4 years, Janet learned her struggling client had been quietly donating millions to charity and had saved the biggest gift for last. Janet Wilson was a 52-year-old, experienced elderly caregiver living in Millfield, a small town in Michigan. She had been doing this job for 20 years and had worked with all kinds of elderly people, rich, poor, kind ones, difficult ones. She treated them all with the same love and respect. Janet's life philosophy was simple. Elderly people need friendship and understanding at the end of their lives. Regardless of their financial situation, they all deserve the same attention. In February 2019, Janet was assigned a new client, 82-year-old Eleanor Patterson. The request was simple: 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, house cleaning, meal preparation, shopping, and companionship. When Janet first saw Eleanor's house, she immediately got an idea about the woman's financial situation. The house was small, a modest 2-bedroom ranch built in the 1960s. The furniture was old but clean. Everything was plain and unassuming. Eleanor also supported this impression with her appearance. She was a thin, gray-haired, gentle 82-year-old woman. Her clothes were simple. She had no jewelry. Her speech was polite but shy. "I don't want expensive things, Janet," Eleanor had said on the first day. "I'm a simple person. I have simple needs." Janet quickly learned Eleanor's daily routine. The woman woke up at 7 a.m. every morning, had a simple breakfast, and watched the news on television. Lunch was usually canned soup or sandwiches. Dinner was similarly simple. The only thing that caught attention in Eleanor's house was the bookshelf. She had many books: history, biography, economics, even some investment books. When Janet noticed these books, she had asked, "You really love these books, Mrs. Patterson?" "Old hobby," Eleanor had said with a smile. "I used to read a lot when I was young." Eleanor's social life was also limited. Visitors rarely came. The phone didn't ring much either. Janet thought the woman lived alone. But Eleanor's financial situation was her most obvious characteristic. During grocery shopping, she constantly looked at prices, chose discounted products, and used coupons. To reduce the electricity bill, she turned off unnecessary lights and kept the heat at minimum. When Janet saw Eleanor's car, her judgment of poverty was confirmed. A 1999 Toyota Camry with 350,000 kilometers, faded paint and scratches. The air conditioning didn't work. The radio was broken. "This car is very old, Mrs. Patterson," Janet had said one day. "Maybe you could consider replacing it with a new one?" Eleanor had laughed. "This car has brought me this far, Janet. It still takes me places. Why should I change it?" As months passed, Janet really began to love Eleanor. The woman was very kind, patient, and understanding. She never complained and thanked her for everything. Eleanor loved Janet too. "Finding someone like you is hard, Janet," she would often say. "You're not just doing your job, you really care." At the end of the first year, Janet began to notice some strange habits of Eleanor's. The woman definitely went to the bank every Monday at 2 p.m. Routine business, she would say, but this routine was repeated every week. Eleanor also wrote many letters, handwritten in old-style envelopes. When Janet asked, she got the answer, "Correspondence with old friends." In the second year, Janet discovered another oddity in Eleanor's television habits. The woman followed financial news very closely, stock reports, economics programs. She wondered why an 82-year-old would be so interested. "Mrs. Patterson, why do you watch these financial news so carefully?" she had asked one day. Eleanor had smiled. "Old habit. I was interested in economics when I was young." At the beginning of the third year, Eleanor became ill. It wasn't a serious condition, but she needed a house doctor. Janet had thought Eleanor would have her own doctor, but Eleanor had made an appointment at a very expensive private clinic. "This is a very expensive doctor, Mrs. Patterson. Maybe the state version." "I don't economize on health, Janet. I always prefer the best in this matter." This had shaken Janet's thoughts about Eleanor. but they hadn't discussed it. Towards the end of the 4th year, Eleanor's health deteriorated further, but she could still stay at home and do her daily tasks with Janet's help. Eleanor had become more emotional during this period. "Janet," she had said one day, "you've become like family to me. Meeting you 4 years ago was my greatest luck." Janet had also been affected. "I feel the same way about you, Mrs. Patterson. You're a very special woman." In December 2023, Eleanor suddenly became ill and was hospitalized. Janet visited her every day. Eleanor had no other visitors. In her last days, Eleanor had told Janet, "Janet, I have a surprise for you, but not now. You'll learn when the time comes." Janet had thought this was a small personal gift, maybe some of Eleanor's personal items. Eleanor passed away peacefully on January 15, 2024. Janet had organized the funeral ceremony. Surprisingly, few people came to the ceremony. Eleanor had indeed been a lonely woman. 2 days after the funeral, Janet went to clean Eleanor's house. She would collect the belongings before the city garbage collectors came. While collecting Eleanor's bedroom, Janet found a file cabinet behind the closet. It contained documents and papers. Janet looked to see if Eleanor had any family. The first document she saw were bank statements. When Janet saw the numbers, she couldn't believe her eyes. Account balance, $47,350,000. Janet thought the document was wrong. Maybe someone else's document had gotten mixed up. But the name clearly said Eleanor Patterson. She continued examining other documents, stock portfolios, bond certificates, real estate documents. Eleanor's total wealth was close to $50 million. Janet was shocked. The poor woman she had cared for 4 years had tens of millions of dollars in wealth. There were other shocks in the file, too. Details of Eleanor's donations to charity foundations. She had donated $30 million in the last 10 years. Education scholarships, medical research, orphanages. The biggest shock was the document at the end of the file, Eleanor's will. Janet began reading the will and her eyes filled with tears. "I, Eleanor Marie Patterson, being of sound mind, make this will. I leave all my assets to Janet Wilson, who has cared for me like family, loved me and valued me in my last 4 years. Janet, this is the surprise I prepared for you. You loved me for my character, not my money. Even thinking I was poor, you showed the same love. This fortune now belongs to you. But I have one request. Don't use this money just for yourself. Use it for good purposes too. Make the world a slightly better place. You were my greatest treasure. Now you too have real treasure. Love and gratitude, Eleanor." Janet was crying. What a woman Eleanor was. She had tested her true character for 4 years. Eleanor's life story was also in the file. She had lost her husband at a young age, had no children. But she had become a very successful businesswoman. Property investments, stock trading, business partnerships. She had quietly accumulated a fortune. Eleanor had deliberately lived simply. She had hidden her wealth, because she wanted to see true kindness. "Most people are nice if they know you're rich," she had written in her notes. "But to see real love, you have to appear poor." A week later, the lawyer called Janet. The will had been officially processed through probate. "Congratulations, Mrs. Wilson," said the lawyer. "You now own a $50 million fortune." Janet still couldn't believe it was real. The first months were very difficult. Suddenly having this much money was overwhelming. But she remembered Eleanor's advice. Use it for good purposes. Janet established the Eleanor Patterson Foundation. The foundation's mission? To support elderly care workers and provide better care for old people. Janet also expanded her own caregiving business, but she also began offering free services for families who couldn't afford it financially. A year later, Janet gave an interview to the local newspaper. Eleanor didn't just leave me money. She also left me responsibility. I have to use this wealth well. Janet's story went viral in the media. Headlines like, "Caregiver inherits $50 million from client she thought was poor," began appearing everywhere. But Janet continued to live the same simple life. Same house, same car, same friends. The only difference was that the number of people she could help had dramatically increased. Eleanor's house was turned into a museum. The Eleanor Patterson House of Hidden Philanthropy. Visitors could learn Eleanor's story and think about the meaning of true wealth. Janet visited Eleanor's grave every week. "I will continue to be grateful to you, Eleanor," she would say. "You gave me not just money, but life purpose." 2 years later, Janet's foundation had provided training and financial support to 500 elderly care workers. 1,000 elderly people had also received better care. Janet began giving speeches. "Money isn't important without character, but character isn't important if you can't make an impact without money." A note Janet found in Eleanor's mansion had become her life motto. "Real richness isn't money. Real richness is being able to make a positive impact on someone's life." Janet now knew why Eleanor had been so careful about money. She knew the value of every dollar, and Janet had learned the same approach. Eleanor's unexpected gift hadn't just changed Janet's life, it had also made thousands of people's lives better. And maybe, most importantly, Janet was now an inspiration to other people. Real success is in the kindness and service found in hiding places. Eleanor Patterson could have given her money to any charity, but she chose to give it to someone who had shown true disinterested love. Janet's story continues today. The Eleanor Patterson Foundation is now one of the Midwest's most important elderly care organizations. But Janet never forgets Eleanor's real legacy. Money is a powerful tool, but only when used with love and compassion.